This is my 2-year review for this guy, the Canon RF 100 to 400 f5.6 to 8, which is Canon's entry-level super telephoto zoom lens. Now, there's really only one other lens. Actually, now there's two currently in their lineup. There's the RF 100 to 500, and now there's also the RF 200 to 800. And both of those lenses sort of compete with this one, but they're really in different price brackets. So because of that, this lens is pretty much on its own in terms of the value proposition that it brings to the table.
The lens has a variable aperture from f5.6 to f8. This sounds fairly slow since many people spend most of their time using the lens at 400mm f8. However, in my experience, this aperture is fine for daylight photography with my RP and my R6. You're likely not going to be getting much action before sunrise or after sunset, and maybe even the lowest light hours either. I do have some sunset photos with the RF 100 to 400, and I also have some bird photos near dusk, so it is certainly possible, but I suspect this was partly helped by the fact that I was using full frame. I wouldn't count on being able to get that sort of result if you plan on using this lens with the R10 or the R7 or any crop sensor cameras. However, for most people, I think it's a worthwhile trade-off for this lens's two big strengths, which are compact size and weight, and of course also its reasonable price. At 635 grams, this lens is easy to handhold all day, and that is another big selling point. That said, the build quality isn't cheap. It feels way nicer than my EFS 55 to 250, which felt extremely plasticky. This is at least like a nice kind of plastic. There is also no lens hood included, but third-party options are pretty easy to find and also very cheap. The lens magnification on the 100 to 400 is 0.41x, which means that you can take good close-up shots with this lens, although it's not going to be as magnified as a true macro lens, such as the RF 100mm macro.
And you can see here I have it on my Canon R7, and I think this is probably the best setup really for this lens. I think this lens pairs extremely well with the Canon R7 for multiple reasons, but the biggest reason is the fact that the R7 is a crop factor camera. The 100 to 400 focal length actually becomes much longer, and on the longer end it's like 640 millimeters, which is actually quite good. For example, bird photography, that's actually a really nice range, and it becomes a really nice zoom for wildlife as well. As long as it's not like super large wildlife, it's going to be, or like a whole flock of birds or something, then this could be a really nice range for that, especially on a crop sensor camera. There's also the price of this lens and the fact that it pairs much better with the Canon R7 than it does with, say, putting it on like a Canon R5 or even a Canon R6 Mark II, or the Canon R5 Mark II. Yeah, the pricing pairs much, much better with the Canon R7. So my 2-year opinion on this, though, for my personal use, I would say that this has definitely lived up to that billing. It's an extremely lightweight lens, and because of that, you can sort of take this places that other people aren't going to want to take their lenses, and that's really, really helpful. For example, travel. I would much rather travel with this lens. I also own the RF 100 to 500. I would much, much rather travel with this lens. It's much easier to use in a wider variety of situations as well because, well, I mean, you can certainly just walk around the street with this all day, and, it's a large enough lens people will notice, but it's certainly one you could walk around with as a touristy lens, and it's not going to be too heavy or anything like that. You can carry this lens around all day on the R7 or even one of the full frame cameras and really not have any issues at all with the size or the weight too much of it. It can fit in a backpack, a fairly small backpack even, pretty easily. Now, note that this does not come with a lens hood. I will also say this lens is now weather sealed, so you have to take that into consideration. It's never really been a problem for me, but if you're in certain types of environments, that might be a reason to look into other lenses instead. After 2 years with this lens, would I buy this lens again if I had the choice? I mean, yes, because there's not really a lot of other options. Like Canon doesn't really have things that, overlap with this lens in terms of value and functionality. And honestly, I've gotten more use out of this lens than I have out of my 100 to 500, which is kind of saying something, but it also speaks to my exact use cases, I feel like. Just because I tend to use this a lot while like hiking and stuff like that. And I don't know, I've just had more situations recently where I was hiking than situations where I was just totally set up looking for birds at like a specific spot. The 100 to 500 is definitely pretty portable, but you definitely feel it a lot more, especially if you're going to do birds in flight, for example. Out of all the lenses I have, this one has been either the first or second in terms of the most sort of highly rated photos that I've taken, rated by myself. So it's definitely been a very, very good investment for me personally. I've gotten a lot of use out of this lens. It's definitely a lens that I'll just pick up in situations where I just want a lens and I want it to be lightweight. I don't know where I'm necessarily going. I don't know what will necessarily be there, but I know I want some telephoto or super telephoto capabilities. You can also put the RF 1.4 extender on here, and that's pretty nice as well. You can put the 2x extender. Now you will start to see the f-stop go up quite a bit in terms of losing light, which is a problem, and especially on crop sensor. And then also, I do think it can affect the autofocus a little bit. Personally, I actually enjoy using it the best with just on the R7, no extender. I've really liked this particular combo. And then I'll use the extender for something that's, maybe sitting still. So would I recommend this lens after 2 years? I definitely would. It's one of the lenses I've gotten my most money's worth out of in the past 2 years, and it was honestly one of my best investments. I would especially recommend it if you're someone who owns a Canon R7, just because, like I said, it pairs extremely well with this camera body. It's a really, really, really good pick with this one. I would get it over a lot of other lenses. It's just super easy to move the zoom as well on the fly. You can just quickly be in position and get a lot of great shots. But it's a solid option on full frame as well for travel photography. I think this is a great option for travel photography. And yeah, I don't think you'll be too disappointed unless you're looking for extreme levels of sharpness, in which case the 100 to 500 will give you a sharper image. And it will give you a slightly brighter aperture. And it will probably do a better job in a variety of high demanding extreme weather conditions. But if that's not what you're looking for and you're on a budget, this is definitely a go-to option. And I would definitely recommend it after 2 years of using it.